Hi, friends. Welcome to tonight's live chat. I decided to sign on just a minute or so early. I was looking through the chat box and kind of allowing myself to process what we're going to talk about tonight because it's going to be a lot. So I figured, you know what? I better just sign on, instead of making myself anxious waiting until the clock hits 7:30. You know what I mean? I do want to verbally say thank you to Kamisha. Is it Kamisha Green Unapologetically and Laura Fit for becoming members of the channel? Thank you so much. All of you, whether you're a member or not, are appreciated. So thank you so much for your continual support. It's amazing to see how many members this channel has gotten. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys. Let's jump in, okay? Everything looks good on my side. Good. Awesome. Thank you, Kamisha. Everything looks good on my side. So let's just jump into what this conversation is so that we can wrap up at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time and have some Saturday left, So, oh God, highly sensitive people are not typically problematic. Highly sensitive people. You've probably seen that on Google. You've probably seen it on YouTube. You've seen it, written in articles and blog posts on mental health conditions and just kind of relationships and how you function. I tend to be not highly sensitive, but I'm sensitive. I'm a sensitive person, meaning that if you're crying and there's a strong emotion and I'm really in it with you, I'm probably going to cry with you. People who step on my toes or they are just unnecessarily rude and disrespectful and disregarding, I sometimes feel that, right? If somebody says something that's untrue or somebody's civil rights or personal rights are disregarded, you're going to see me get upset. You're going to see me get offended. If somebody cuts me off in traffic and almost causes a collision, you're going to see me get upset. A highly sensitive person. I really and honestly think it's wearing your heart on your sleeves, literally, right? But that's not what we're talking about in tonight's live chat. So I wanted to clearly decipher between the two, a highly sensitive personality or person versus an extremely sensitive person to criticism, extremely insecure, extremely triggered, right? Any kind of feedback for these kind of individuals, we're calling them hypersensitive because we don't want to regard to them as highly sensitive people, because I think a lot of us, especially on my channel, we are highly sensitive people. That's probably why we get along so well, right? And we come together and we agree on the topics on the channel, and you guys can relate to each other in such a beautiful way. And I think that's because mostly everybody on my channel is highly sensitive in some form, But a hypersensitive person is so very different because a hypersensitive person misperceives the intention of somebody's statements, comments, behaviors. They tend to be very personally affected by any kind of criticism, by any kind of feedback, by any kind of judgment, right? These individuals are extremely sensitive to criticism, even if you don't mean it in a critical way, or even if you don't mean to be critical. The person who is hypersensitive, they tend to take it really, really personal. And so you may find any conversation with your hypersensitive mother, any conversation with your hypersensitive father, any kind of communication over text, email, or phone call with your hypersensitive siblings is going to lead to a problem. And that is because they are hypersensitive. There's always this constant perceived negative kind of edge to any and everything that is expressed to them by somebody else. So there's kind of like this fear of being wrong too, this fear of being wrong. Let's say, for example, and I'm going to give you a clinical example in a second. Let's say, for example, your narcissistic mother has always said negative things about you, negative things about how you dress, negative things about your hair, negative things about your skin tone, negative things about the job you work at, the people you date, the friends that you keep. There's always been this negative connotation to any and everything that has anything to do with your life, how you live, how you think, how you feel, right? So let's say that's your narcissistic mother. And hypersensitive narcissistic mother is going to get offended by you saying to her, Mom, I'm sorry. I love who I love. I can't help that I, love this person. I want to marry them. I want to be a part of their life for a long time. I'm sorry you don't like his sister. I'm sorry you don't like her mother, but I'm going to be with this person because this is who I click with. This is who I really feel safe with and content with. Your hypersensitive mother will come back at you and say, oh, so are you saying that my feelings don't matter either? Are you saying that I can't have an opinion? Because I raised you. That's why you're so good at everything that you do in your life, because I raised you. So it's, this guy is not good enough for you, or she's not good enough for you because I've raised you really well. I've raised you better than he or she was raised. So how dare you say to me that you're going to love whoever I don't like and approve of, right? That's a narcissistic, hypersensitive person. Instead of mom saying, I understand. I've been there in my past. I haven't always been able to minimize the feelings that I have for people in my life. So I've just had to take a chance with them. And if it makes you happy and it's safe and it's going to lead to a better you, go for it. I give you my blessing. That's a balanced parent, right? But a hypersensitive narcissistic parent is not going to come back at you like that. They're going to get defensive. They're going to start criticizing you. They're going to start belittling you and maybe some of the friends you keep or the spouses that you have. They are also going to take anything that you say to them in response to what you have shared with them. They're going to take that as a personal slight. Hypersensitive people have what we call fragile egos. A fragile ego is kind of like this false development of a self-concept. It's a false development of a self-concept. It's false, or it's kind of one-sided, right? It's somebody's view of themselves that is kind of like the strength of paper, it just kind of blows in the breeze. There's nothing really strong about that person's ego. It tends to be fragile, built on lies, built on misperceptions, built on fantasy, built on narcissism, built on small experiences that have made them feel great. A fragile ego gets hurt all the time because they don't have a foundation in any place. There's no roots, right? A person who has a stable, healthy, what's the word I'm looking for? Concrete ego. They tend to be confident, humble, modest, smart, quick-witted. They know how to admit their faults. They know how to say, I messed up there. Whoops, sorry. I'm going to change it, right? They tend to be stable people, but a fragile ego is not that way. Misunderstandings can happen because of a parent's fragile ego. Constant lashing out can happen, and so can grudge holding. People with fragile egos often are problematic, and they tend to be very hypersensitive. It's hard to have a conversation with them. It's hard to meet them halfway. Now, let me also say that you may notice what we call neuroticism in these kind of individuals. Neuroticism is kind of like this internalized foundational way that the person kind of engages in the world, so they tend to be depressed, anxious, very, very hypersensitive to things. They tend to be negative, most of the time pessimistic in their mood and their outlook on life. And everything is kind of rushed. Let me turn my fan off, guys, because I feel like it's out talking me. I hope you guys can hear my fan down there. I have air conditioning, but my fan just feels really good. But I could hear something like blocking out my hearing. So hopefully you guys didn't hear it. But, a person who is neurotic, they tend to be very unstable. You know, a narcissistic mother who gets offended at you saying, I'm sorry, mom, I'm going to go ahead and marry him. I'm sorry, dad, I'm going to go ahead and marry A, B, and C. A narcissistic parent who is really hypersensitive can have a neurotic foundation where they become, you know, extra angry. They hold grudges. They're nervous all over the place. They're anxious. They're typing up emails that are long emails. You know, sometimes emails can tell you a lot about a person, right? They're typing up long text messages. They're typing up long emails and sending it not only to you, but to Uncle Bo and Uncle Bill and Uncle Dude and Susu and BB over there, because your mother is neurotic, right? And she's narcissistic and she wants to get everybody's opinion on what's happening, because most people who are hypersensitive, they really rely on external validation. And so a lot of times you'll see with these personality types, you will see not only just neuroticism, but this deep need to be validated. And it's not a healthy need to be validated. You know, I think a lot of you on my channel, you have a healthy form of a need of validation. You want to know, is that unstable family member unstable, or is it just me? Is that narcissist over there truly a narcissist, or is it just me? You know, is that person over there really somebody I should go no contact with? Those are mainly the emails that I usually get from a lot of you who watch my channel who are on live chat tonight. So that's like a healthy validation. But an unhealthy need for external validation is, I'm going to type you up a 2-page email that explains everything. Okay. And I'm saying it like that for a reason, because a person who is neurotic has a fragile ego, tends to be extremely hypersensitive, and you know, they tend to have this perceived slight. So in other words, they're constantly being slighted. They often write really long text messages, really long emails, because they feel the need to really over explain. And so that can be overwhelming to the person on the other side who's clicking the email to open it, and boom, there's like 5 books, you know, 5 pages and chapters worth of information, and it is overkill. But hypersensitive people tend to lean into that. If they're neurotic, they also tend to lean into that as well, and they tend to have a very negative, low mood most of the time. Let me also say too, in this category, there is often a poor perception of any kind of criticism or feedback. So you may not be giving negative feedback. You may not be giving any kind of criticism, but it's the perceived criticism that is the problem. It's how the person views what you're saying through their own lens. And that's what tends to cause the problems. That's what tends to lead to misunderstandings, to holding grudges, to being angry for years. The list goes on. Now, because these people have this internal hypersensitivity where you can't talk to them, you can't engage them in a conversation, you can't even go and sit with them at, you know, at dinner or at a lunch and have a very healthy adult conversation, because they are right on the edge of their seat, wanting to challenge you, argue with you, manipulate you, triangulate, right? And do a whole smorgasbord, of things that kind of disrupts the communication between you and them. You know, it's hard to have a conversation with these kind of people. They tend to have what we call an oppositional conversational style. An oppositional conversational style. They often go against what you're saying. They challenge what you're saying. They point out your mispronunciations. They point out that you forgot to say A, B, and C. You miscalculated that. Try it again. You know, that's an oppositional conversational style. And these people tend to have that. That is why it's hard to have conversations with them, because they're going to come back at you in some way that doesn't allow them to sit with what you're saying to them, because they've got their barrier and their defenses up so much that nothing you say kind of penetrates, right? And you can begin to feel really unheard by these kind of family members and individuals. Let me also say that these people also have what we call selective attention and selective memory. You may ask them to remember something and they say, oh no, it didn't happen that way. Here's what I remember, right? So they selectively choose what they're going to remember about a situation. And they also have selective attention. They may zone out while you're telling them all the reasons why you can no longer be a part of their life, but they click in when you start talking about something else. And that is highly frustrating, right? Sometimes the selective memory and selective attention is intentional. And sometimes it's very unintentional. They shut off when you're talking about something that they really need to hear, and they click back in and they're on, bright eyed and ready to think when you talk about something that doesn't involve them. I've had, over the course of my 16-year career, in a variety of job positions, experiences, I have been the victim. I'm going to say victim because I feel victimized. I am the victim as a therapist of hypersensitive personalities, not highly sensitive. Highly sensitive is healthy. Hypersensitive can have a little bit more of a negative connotation, because hypersensitive means nobody can get through. Nobody can say anything to your dad over there because he's going to get offended right away. You can't skip Christmas because you're going to be disrespectful to your mom. You're going to be disrespectful to your siblings, right? So those kind of hypersensitive personalities. So over the course of my 16-year career, I've had clients who have been highly sensitive, and I've had clients who have been hypersensitive. My highly sensitive clients, I totally love. They are very clicked in, intuitive, wise. They understand their feelings and others, and they do really good with what we call metacognition. They do really good at introspection and thinking about thinking, and thinking about judgments and thinking about introspection. So the highly sensitive clients, for me, they're wonderful. But my past experience with hypersensitive clients has really been a challenging part of my career, because it's hard to give them feedback. It's hard to give them in the moment feedback. It's hard sometimes to get a word in edgewise during the appointment or during the session, because the hypersensitive person is kind of in a subliminal way. They are blocking an opportunity to be corrected. They are blocking any kind of opportunity for the therapist to step in and say, okay, you were wrong there. Why did you decide to do it that way? Did you think about doing it this way instead? Do you think your mom took that well? Do you think you handled that well? What's your thoughts about that? They don't want to hear that. So hypersensitive clients put up a defense. And if you do get a chance to somehow get a word in edgewise, okay, if you get a word in with these kind of clients, you better watch out, because if you say the wrong thing, they're going to shut down on you very quickly. They may stop their eye contact, right? Dart over this way, looking all over here and over there, as opposed to paying attention to you. And they're probably going to sit on the edge of their seat waiting for the session to be over. And that's basically a clinical style of personality that I've dealt with for so long. Now, there's also other kinds of hypersensitive clients. Before I get to the chat box, there's also other hypersensitive individuals who they really they squirm and they get, kind of like fidgety, and they're really, really uncomfortable in their body language, and they're having a hard time sitting and listening, and any kind of conversation about them makes them uncomfortable. I've had over the past 3 years, or maybe I should say 3 years ago, because I no longer see this client, but she was an adolescent girl. She had a lot of identity issues, a lot of insecurity, a lot of low self-esteem, and any kind of conversation that we had with her mother, with her father, her grandmother was also raising her, she would bend into a pretzel. Okay. And if she didn't bend into a pretzel, she would be sitting this way on the couch, or she would squirm like this down and hold her body, or she would just kind of sit like this, like, yeah, hurry up and get to the point. And it was very disrespectful, very, very ugly disposition. But the disposition was this: I'm uncomfortable about me. I have an internal problem, and I have a fragile ego. And I'm very neurotic at the core. And so therefore, I can't hear you. I won't hear you because I can't deal with what's in here. So I'm going to sit here and say, la, 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 right? Because it's easier for me to ignore what you say rather than to actually hear you. And so that became a treatment barrier for sure. Let me also say briefly before I go to the chat box that sometimes these hypersensitive individuals, they can have the attitude of, that's stupid. Everything is stupid. You're stupid. Oh, that's a stupid thing to say. Oh, that doesn't mean anything. you know, or they could say something like, oh, this is so dumb, you know, or why would you say that? That makes no sense, you know, or you may have heard a friend, a parent, a coworker say something like, oh, like that makes any sense, right? Or I'm going to throw another one at you. Sometimes these highly or hyper insecure individuals or hypersensitive individuals, they may also say things like, this is so dumb. Why would you even bring that up? You always say the dumbest things. Nothing you ever say is smart. Everything you do is stupid. Why are they like this, right? Well, for some people, it's because they are hypersensitive. And it's a defense, it's a block, right? If everybody else out there is stupid, and if all the things that is being presented to them in life is idiotic and stupid, then they feel better. Why? Because it puts them up here. It hurts to be down here. It hurts to have that insecure position in that heart and in that soul and in that mind that says something's wrong with me, or I have to look at me, or I caused that argument over there. It's too hard for them to accept that. So what do? They say everything is stupid, right? It puts them here and it puts everything under there. And so having a life with these difficult people, my Lord, it's so difficult because you can't have an equal relationship with a person who thinks everything is stupid, with a person that you have to walk on eggshells with. You can't say anything, you can't express anything, you can't, you know, have your own opinion about things, you can't disagree with them on anything. And if you do, watch out, because they're coming to get you later. They often tend to have really intense episodes of anger. They tend to be bullies sometimes because, again, they're trying to protect that fragile ego. So what does a person do when they want to protect that fragile ego? They get angry, they get ferocious. They think that if they throw things and scream and curse and, you know, slam things, that it's going to intimidate you and it's going to cause you to go over there and leave them away. The reality for most of these kind of individuals is that they're not going to change. Why? Because they don't want to see that they're the problem. They want to believe that you're the problem. And so you may hear things from a family member like this say, I never have problems with other people. It's only with you. I never have problems with Uncle BB. I don't know why, you know, the only thing I can think of is Aunt Susu said that you were like this. You know, and so you're going to get those kind of comments. But if you feel like you're dealing with a hypersensitive person, then keep in mind as much as you can that they're often fighting a battle with themselves. It's not you, it's with themselves. And that battle is that fragile ego that they're trying to protect. And it's going to make them act out in all kind of ways. And if you're not careful, like I've been the victim of in the past, particularly starting out as a baby in the career and my career and needing more clinical experience many years ago as a baby in the field, I would get offended. I would be hurt. I would ask why, you know, I never wanted to push a client. I never wanted to push a family. I never wanted to push the wrong buttons. But after 16 years of growing and learning, I've learned, and this is why I'm giving you this information tonight. I've learned that a lot of times the problem is not with you. Sometimes it's them. And again, they're protecting something and you're getting too close, or maybe you see through them and they don't like that either. So tonight's live chat, guys, we're going to talk about common challenges that you are likely to experience with these kind of people. I also want to talk briefly about avoidant personality disorder, and I'm going to give you some information on how this impacts you. So let me go ahead to the chat box and see what you guys are saying. Fairy Girl, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. I'm always glad to see you. Kamisha Green, unapologetically me, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Ponytail, glad you loved it before it started. I saw your comment earlier. I'm like, that is so awesome. Pink Meadows, hello. And Annie Welker, hello to you as well. Good to see you. Lorfit, I already said hello to you. Okay, Mark Lee, hello and welcome. Garrett Bennett, hello and welcome. Good to see you as well. Johanne Kobe, hello and welcome. Good to see you back tonight. Jessica J, welcome back. So good to see you guys. All right, Ellie Wynn, Starburst, Jacqueline Fuller, and Rochella. Hello to all of you. Glad to see you tonight. And Jacqueline Fuller, thank you so much for being a member on the channel. I don't know if I've thanked you yet, but thank you for doing that, and welcome to the channel. So glad to have you. Rochella says, it's like you can't talk to them about anything other than the weather. Surface level conversations. They create estrangement even when you're in close proximity. That is so true. I'm actually going to star that comment in the chat box so that it will stay kind of as the centerpiece of the conversation. Because you are right. That's what I'm talking about. And that's what I was saying earlier. You can't get deeper, you're right, than a surface level conversation. And anytime I've had clients like this in the past, you want to know what they talk about? The weather, what's happening in the news, the new furniture I got, the nice picture I got on the wall, I have on the wall, all my degrees on the wall. You look nice today. How was your weekend? Do you celebrate holidays? Politics, religion, and sometimes friends, external family, all of that becomes center stage. And you want to know something? A therapist who gets that multiple sessions in a row, we're already ahead of you. Most of us, those who are experienced, we know you are hiding something. Not only are you hiding something, but you're protecting something. And what is that? Why are we still talking about this? I said to a mother 2 years ago that I had, her son had borderline personality traits, had obsessive compulsive disorder, so OCD, and I could see a little bit of some antisocial personality traits shining through. What I noticed is mom would send him into his appointment on his own, even though there's 2 waiting areas that's rather quiet and, welcoming. Mom didn't want to come in because mom doesn't want to trigger her son. Mom doesn't want to trigger anything that's going to stir an argument with her son because he is so hypersensitive. So what she would do is just send him in. He would come into my office. Excuse me, he would greet me, I would greet him, he would sit down. But guess what? He never gave me eye contact in any of our conversations, and he was not on the autism spectrum. So I'm going to kind of diffuse that possible theory that he could have been on the spectrum. He was not. Tested, didn't have the symptoms, didn't meet the criteria. So he would talk and avoid eye contact with me. His body was turned kind of away from me. He never faced me at all. His body was always turned towards the door, like he was ready to run out, And most of the time we talked about school peers. We talked about projects that was coming up for his musical band. Then he took on some extracurricular classes outside of high school. He would tell me all about that, and conversations over time. And I let it go for several sessions just to see, is this a strategy? Is he inching up to something that he wants to talk about, but he doesn't know how? And that time came and went, guys, and he never got to the point. Why? Because he's hiding something. He didn't want to have to take responsibility for his bullying behaviors in his family. He did not want to take responsibility for being a bully, even to other kids, and not being engaging in relationships in a healthy way. So let's please mom, so that we can continue to just have peace. I'm going to go in, act like I'm doing therapy. I'm going to talk about anything under the sun except for what's wrong with me. And then I'm going to leave. And that is how it went for multiple sessions. So, Rochella, you're right. That is typically a common pattern of these individuals. And it doesn't have to just happen in therapy. CBs, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. CB says, my mom would get so angry when I tried to baby-proof her home for my kids. Lots of accidents happened to my sister and I, as kids. I was being careful. Yeah, which I totally understand. You're being careful. At the same time, you just want to be like, okay, mom, I totally get you. You don't want your house baby-proof. You've already raised kids. You don't really want the house being in a way that's going to make you feel like now you have to be careful. Your kids are grown. You don't want new babies or additional responsibilities. I get that. But CBs, if it's the main piece, if the main piece of the puzzle is I'm just an angry person, I'm hypersensitive, and I get offended by everything, if that's the core of the issue, then that's really hard to deal with. It's hard to deal with. Sun and Sunflowers, Kev Dower, hello, welcome to the both of you. Good to see you tonight. Ponytail says, oh my, yes, my sister would go off when I walked in a room. She would say, there she goes again. What in the world? Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, these people are very hypersensitive. So as you're going to see in a little bit, they've got other personality pieces that makes communication with them really difficult. So you're going to see that in just a little bit. The good glow, hello. Oh, thank you so much for that. I am humbled when you guys do those things and say those things. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be of help. That's awesome. Okay, let me find new people, guys. Fairy girl, I'm going to put you up here for a second so people can see what you're saying. I'm going to take a sip while I put that up there. Okay. Excuse me. A seat at the King's table with Tanisha. Hello and welcome. Good to see you back in tonight's live chat. Okay. Thank you so much, Annie Walker. That's so sweet. You're welcome. That is awesome. And I'm grateful that I can be in good health. You know what I mean? I do have a migraine right now and my vision is really blurry, but I'm still grateful that I am healthy enough to be able to come back weekend after weekend after weekend. You know what I mean? And be with you guys and teaching you things and learn from you as well. The things that you guys share in the chat box, sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, let me go Google that. What's that called? You know, so you guys are teaching me too. So I'm so glad we get to do this week after week. Is it, oh, this is hard. Is it Mr. Gel? Ooh, and my vision is blurry, so I can't tell. Is that an R or an I? I don't know. MZ Gel, that's what I'm going to go with. MZ Gel, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. That's a fantastic question. Is there any hope of recovery for hypersensitive individuals? There may be. There may be. I tend to be a little bit more pessimistic when it comes to hypersensitive individuals because really what the issue is this: it's a fragile ego. It's a need to take accountability, pull down all defenses, be humble and learn, accept feedback, and change. They don't want to do any of that. Hypersensitive people try to avoid any position of accountability, any position that's going to put them in a bind where they have to think, feel, process. Remember, I said earlier, they have very poor metacognition. They can't think about their thinking. They don't want to think about their thinking. They don't want to think about their preconceived notions. They don't want to be attached to reality, most of them, because it hurts too much, you know? So is there hope? I'm pessimistic about it. I hate to say it, but I'm just being honest. I personally don't see hope for them unless they are humble enough or something pushes them to become aware of their hypersensitivity. And that might happen when they have children of their own and they are forced to be frequently forgiving, supportive, loving towards the child. Sometimes that shifts that hypersensitive kind of disposition and emotionality. But there is some research that also says there's hope for them. They just have to work on that fragile ego. The clients that come to my practice for treatment, if I see that they have a fragile ego, they are extremely sensitive, they are hypersensitive, they don't take any kind of feedback well, everything is a problem, everything you say is a problem, and even small mistakes are a problem, that is when I say, okay, we may need a Freudian kind of approach, which we call psychodynamic. And that's when the therapist really works with your ego. They work with internalized emotions that you have. They also kind of work with your childhood, your past traumas, the list goes on. So I guess what I'm saying here is, for me, clinically and personally or professionally, I don't see a lot of hope unless they can face themselves. Research says there is hope, but a specific kind of treatment like psychodynamic treatment may be needed. That's my long answer to that awesome question. I hope that was helpful. Kamisha Green, unapologetically me, says, wow, I have been experiencing a person that is like this, but I have been seeing it the total opposite. They don't listen, but always want to be heard. Yes, that is a good point. They don't listen. Remember my live chat that I recently did when I said offended by everything, responsible for nothing? I think it was something like that. That is basically how these people are, offended by everything, but accountable to nothing. You know what I mean? And the way that you're putting it is they don't listen, but always want to be heard. Absolutely. You're going to see that a ton. Composite Z, I hope that's Campsite Z, excuse me for that. Hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat and welcome to the channel. Campsite Z says you have to be insecure around narcissists and psychopaths because if you compromise your security and let them know anything they can use against you, they will do that. Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't say that you have to be insecure around narcissists and psychopaths. I get where you're coming from, though. I would say that you often have to kind of minimize yourself. You have to become smaller when you're in the realm of a narcissist because they're always going to want to be bigger and louder than you in some fashion. Doesn't mean they're going to yell. Doesn't mean they're going to start a fight. Doesn't mean they're going to be physically aggressive, but they're so loud with how attitudinal they are, passive aggressive they can be, physically aggressive they can be, dominating, manipulative, right? So you kind of do have to shrink yourself. I think that's what you're getting at. And I very much agree with that. Mark Lee says, I've been ghosted by my small remaining family. It's kind of nice. Oh, geez. I get that. Starburst says, neuroticism, does it look like depression sometimes? 100% Starburst. That's a good question. It does. Neuroticism tends to look almost like there's low motivation. Sometimes there's pessimism, there's negativity, and yes, there can sometimes be an irritable and depressive mood. Yes. You know, a person who's neurotic can sometimes just be thinking on and on and on and on, right? And this side is an angel, this side is the devil. And I don't know which side to choose because there's all this I need to consider and there's all that I need to consider. And they tend to just be really over the top in everything. You know, think of a neurotic person as somebody who has no control over their thoughts, very little control over their emotions, very little control over their anxiety, buzzing around like somebody with ADHD, being unable to digest anything because they're constantly on the go as if there's a motor inside of their body. You know, kind of think of it that way. And yes, sometimes, again, it does look like depression. That's a good question. Sylvie, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm probably not. Thank you so much. And same to you. So good to see you. Welcome back tonight. Nancy R. Hello and welcome. Good to see you back tonight. Nancy R. says, totally understand what you were saying about this kind of sensitive person. Yeah. Yep. Good. I can work things out. Breezy. Hello and welcome. Good to see you tonight. Always glad to see you in the live chat. Kamisha Green, unapologetically me, says, yes, they are always on the edge of their seat waiting to be confrontational. Yes, I'm so glad you understand that. Yep. All right, let me find people, and then we're going to go back to the content. Mom Tude, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Welcome back tonight. Third Eye Drops, hello, welcome, and welcome to the channel. Good to see you. They're asking, what disorder is that? Okay. So I'm going to talk about avoidant personality disorder. I don't know if you're asking me about that or if you're asking me about the hypersensitive person. A hypersensitive person is more of a personality trait, and we don't have a specific diagnosis for this kind of a person. We can call them high conflict people, right? We could call them hypersensitive, which I'm calling them tonight. We can call them extremely sensitive people, or we can kind of sweep them under the carpet of avoidant personality disorder. And I'm going to get into that just a little bit later. Fairy Girl says, toxic is toxic. Ellie Wynn says, cannot correct them. No, don't do that. Don't do that. They're going to blow up. Juby Joe, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Laura Fitz says they also hold grudges for years. They do. I once had a client like that. And she was holding a grudge with her father from the age of 10 all the way to the age of 25. She was 25 when she was my client at the time. And I asked her, I says, why are you so angry with your father? Is it something that I'm missing? And she says to me, no, Miss Chandler, you're not missing anything. I says, okay, because it really feels like I am. Why are you so angry? He's such a wonderful dad. And you want to know what she said to me? She says, Miss Tamara, I just have to be honest with you. I'm angry with him because when we were children, I was 10, my brother was 11. He got my brother tickets to a concert that I wanted to go to, but I wasn't old enough to go. My 11-year-old brother was old enough to go, but I wasn't old enough to go. And I've been mad ever since. And I'm telling you, if I didn't have a professional demeanor, my jaw would have dropped and hit the floor, because that is not a reason to be upset with dad, right? Because I say you're 10 and you're not going to a concert. Sometimes concerts can be, as all of you know here on the channel, very violent, depending on the music and the style and the genre, right? So yeah, I wouldn't let my 10-year-old go to a concert. 11, maybe, depending on maturity. But she held that against her dad. So you're right, Lurfit. They hold grudges for many, many years. Jessica J says, yes, Tamara, you are describing my life with the narcissistic in-laws. They have sucked the life out of me. It's nice not being around them. Yeah, I totally get that. Totally get that. Yeah, I don't blame you, Jessica J. I can work things out. Thank you so much for gifting memberships again. You are amazing. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. That's so sweet. Fairy girl with the dabs. Okay. Bear with me, guys. I'm trying to get a few more comments in here. Yeah. Third Eye Drop says, can't try help them. They take that as an attack all the time. Feedback is a tactic that is there to hurt them. You know, feedback is something they don't want, because oftentimes hypersensitive people tend to fear being wrong. There is a fear of being wrong. Did you know that's an actual phobia? Maybe I'll talk to you guys at some other time about all the phobias we have, but there's a fear of being wrong with these people. They can't just say, you know what, I made a mistake. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. You know, I've learned that over the years. You guys have probably learned that over the years too. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what, I messed that up. I'm sorry. I say that to my clients. Sometimes I'll double book, you know, or sometimes my intern will double book me. And sometimes I'll have two clients, thankfully on the same day, that have appointments, but they're like too early or somebody's late. And there have been times I've walked out my waiting room and I look and I'm like, uh-oh, whoops. And, you know, it's human error, right? So sometimes I just have to go to one client and just say, you know what? I am so sorry. I messed this up. Can you forgive me for messing this up? Because I really do appreciate your time. And you often seem to appreciate my time that I give you. Can you stick around? Can I reschedule you? You know what I mean? But you can't do that with a hypersensitive person. A hypersensitive person will jump up and say, I thought my appointment was at 3:00. You're asking me to stay a little bit longer? Why do you think that's okay? I've waited weeks for this appointment. And then the list goes on. And it's like, oh my God, we don't have to do this. You know, there's a different way to approach this. Hypersensitive people, they don't like having to be held accountable. They're not flexible oftentimes, you know, and again, they fear being wrong. So very, very difficult. Thank you so much, MS. I appreciate you for that. Good. I'm glad this is helpful. Din Woke, hello and welcome. Good to see you back tonight. Says they live in a delusion. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. GB Joe says Hub was talking to a man at his job and he said, she is charging up your credit cards. I was doing the opposite. Go to speak with that man that falsely accused me. Oh, geez. Woo, that's a tough one. Ouch. I'm sorry, GB Joe. Mark Lee says, my goal is to get completely back to my true self, clean up, and throw out the drama and wreckage. It's not easy. It can't be faked. It's not for everyone. I very much agree with that, Mark Lee. Very much agree with that. All right, one more person. Michelle, am I saying that well? Am I saying that right? Wilson, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat and welcome to the channel. Okay, we're going to go back to the content. I'm going to get back to you guys in just a second here. Let's talk about common characteristics of hypersensitive people. The first characteristic is resistance to change. They hate it. Once they get comfortable and they're on a road that they are comfortable in, they don't want to change, right? Change means adjustment. Change means responsibility. Change means sometimes you're going to have to shift in ways that you don't want to shift. Hypersensitive people do not want to change. That's just not where they are. They shift blame easily. So it's okay for them to say, you know what? I wouldn't have got so upset if you hadn't done A, B, and C. I wouldn't have had to haul and smack you if you didn't say that. You know, you will see that in domestic violence cases. I used to counsel a family where there was tons of domestic violence all the time, multiple times a day. And I remember the boyfriend, he and my client, they were not married, but they were like almost like common law for many years. And he says to her in a session where he was present, you know, he was really trying to be conservative and look like he's really calm and in control. But once I started unraveling some of the complexities of their family and relationship, you could see him just kind of like, who's the air on in here? He was getting uncomfortable. And so one thing that he threw out there to his girlfriend was, I wouldn't have had to smack you and knock you down if you hadn't said that to me, you know? And it's a very ugly thing when a hypersensitive person kind of shifts on you and they turn things around and they point it at you. So they are very good at deflection. That's the next one. They know how to deflect, right? Deflect. I'm going to deflect with criticisms. I'm going to deflect with asking questions when I know that we're talking about something else. I'm going to shift the conversation. I'm going to shift the emotion in the room. I'm going to cause somebody to get upset so we don't have to stay on this topic. You know, there's a variety of ways that these hypersensitive people protect themselves. They often have symptoms of ADHD, ADHD, ODD, and sometimes conduct disorder as young people, but then they can grow into having antisocial personality disorder. You guys know, I call it the road to sociopathy. And I'll share this with you briefly, especially because I see some new people and you guys may have not been able to see how I usually explain this. So this is what can happen when you're dealing with a hypersensitive person. Sometimes their behaviors start very young. So sometimes you have, as a child, okay, and I'm going to say between the ages of 6 to 18, you can have ADHD. Okay. I'm just going to write this out so you can see this. If ADHD is not treated properly and there's years of problems, then you can develop, or the person can develop, ODD, and that's oppositional defiant disorder. If that's not properly treated, then the person can develop conduct disorder. And if that's not properly treated, the individual can start to show symptoms of antisocial personality disorder. Okay, so this is how this kind of looks on a spectrum. See that, guys? Ooh. See that? So ADHD can sometimes slide into ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. Oppositional defiant disorder can sometimes go into conduct disorder, and sometimes conduct disorder can go into antisocial personality disorder. Okay. And that is how that can go. Now, a lot of people say, well, just because I have ADHD doesn't mean that I'm going to be, you know, somebody who engages in criminal behaviors. Absolutely not, right? ADHD is not a disorder that automatically leads to antisocial behavior. But if we're talking about someone who has ADHD and it's not properly being treated, and they have a lot of impulsive behaviors, they're very hypersensitive to life, to criticism, to things, then yes, it can slide into ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. You know, and children that have oppositional defiant disorder can also be very hypersensitive, which is why they can kind of dish out, but they can't take. So an example of this could be, you know, let's say an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old calls you names, curses at you, defies you, disregards your rights, is very oppositional and disrespectful to adults, has a lot of smart alecky dispositions, right? But if you reverse all of that and they receive that, their hypersensitivity then emerges, because now they're upset that you're calling them an idiot, that you're calling them something that's not what they think of themselves. So oppositional defiant disorder, but then that can also go into conduct disorder. If we don't treat ODD, then we're going into conduct disorder. And that's kind of like a juvenile delinquency. You know, you're doing all the wrong things, or this person is doing all the wrong things. And if that's not properly treated, then we can develop an antisocial personality disorder. And so on that ADHD, ODD, conduct disorder, antisocial spectrum, hypersensitivity can be found on that spectrum. It's pretty interesting, but you got to keep in mind, these individuals most likely have a fragile ego. And if there's a fragile ego, if there's neuroticism at the foundation of ADD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or if there is a problem with perception of reality, like there sometimes is with oppositional children or adolescents, then you're probably going to be on that spectrum. You know what I mean? So it's often good for me to break that down because some people don't realize that those disorders specifically has hypersensitivity within them. Not for everybody, but for most people. Okay, so the next common challenge is little to no accountability. Hypersensitive people do not want to be held accountable. You know, remember I said earlier, they feel like everything is stupid. You're stupid. Everything is dumb. You know, they don't want to be held accountable. So even your attempts to hold them accountable is stupid. That's how they're going to kind of twist this and skew this. They have, and this is more of a, not an issue for them. It's something to kind of make you feel sorry for them, but they often have very, very critical parents. They tend to have helicopter parents sometimes, and not parents who just lovingly stick close to their children. We're talking about strict supervision, you know, and parents who are just, they have too high of expectations. And so a hypersensitive person can become hypersensitive over time because they feel like they can't measure up. Nothing they do is perfect. Nothing they do is ever the way they want it to be. So they become hypersensitive as a result. They also have a lot of counterattacks, you know, just ready to go. You know, you may say something like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Let's say you're saying this to your husband. "Oh, I'm so sorry, honey. I didn't mean to leave that out all night. I meant to put that in the freezer. Darn, I'm sorry I left that out. Hopefully it's still good for dinner tonight." And instead of your husband saying, no, that's okay. Let's just check it and see. If not, we'll just go pick up another one, you know, or we'll refreeze it and throw it out. That's nice problem solving skills, right? But a hypersensitive individual who likes to engage in counterattacks, that husband's going to turn around and say, "How could you do that? How could you let that happen? I thought you knew better than that. You're the one who cooks in the family. Don't you cook Thanksgiving dinner every year for your family? Shouldn't you know you don't leave meat out all night?" A counterattack. And what does a counterattack allow them to do? Shift the blame and shift the perspective. They don't want to be seen as inadequate. They don't want to be held accountable for anything. You know, they do not want to have to look within. They don't have, you know, healthy metacognition. It's poor. And they lack a healthy perception of themselves and reality. So they're going to turn things around and make you the problem. It's a counterattack. They also tend to be ego driven. Everything is driven by their ego, you know, what they say, how they say it, what they wear, the car they drive, the house they have, the job they work, the friends they keep. Everything is driven by ego. And under the surface, it's really a fragile ego, right, guys? They also tend to run around and act like the victim all the time. So they engage oftentimes fully in victimhood. That's what they do. They are victims. They are never the problem. You are. They're not being hypersensitive. You're just being extra cruel. And that's how they will often flip that. They also seek a lot of external validation. It's not healthy validation, like I said earlier, guys. Not where you're just looking for somebody to help you understand if you're seeing things right. That's healthy. But these kind of hypersensitive individuals, they look for external validation to help them prove that they are not in the wrong, to help them prove that what they did wasn't wrong. They will do the offense or cause the offense or create the offense and then go and try to see if somebody can validate what they did because they're hypersensitive and they can't deal with their thoughts. You know, let me mention too, avoidant personality disorder before I go back to the chat box. Avoidant personality disorder is very different from a hypersensitive person. A hypersensitive person has more of a negative connotation. Avoidant personality disorder can have a negative connotation, but the way that I want you to see an avoidant personality and a avoidant personality disorder is you want to identify that these people are very, very anxious at the core of who they are. They have a really hard time connecting to relationships because they fear rejection. They fear not being loved and cared for properly. They want love and affection, but they can't get it because they don't communicate. They don't engage in life. They suffer isolation. They are resistant to intimate relationships. You know, they have what we call risk aversion. They try to dodge risk everywhere. So what happens when you're trying to dodge the risks of living as a human in relation to other people? You isolate, you hide, you don't connect, right? You kind of go off over there by yourself. They tend to have a low self-esteem. They don't tend to have high feelings of self-efficacy, meaning they don't feel that they're competent. They feel that they're incompetent. They feel very shy and insecure. This is an avoidant personality. They have these chronic feelings of inadequacy, and they literally wear them on their sleeves. Their feelings of inadequacy can drive them into isolation because they don't want to be told that they're wrong. They don't want to be told that they're being watched or criticized. They can't handle it. It's way too much. They also tend to have, extreme reactions to any kind of feedback. This is another personality characteristic that gets in the way of them having close relationships. They really do not want to be criticized. The thought of being criticized possibly causes them to go into isolation. They don't want to deal with that, right? They also have a fear of embarrassment. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be shown up to be what I'm not. I don't want you to see what's going on inside of me, So they engage in significant isolation. It's a protective mechanism. A lot of you on here now with me may say, you know what, that's me. And I tend to be an avoidant personality, or somebody I love and know tends to be an avoidant personality. Really at the core of that personality disorder is sensitivity, fear of being rejected, significant isolation, tons of anxiety, and a fear of abandonment, a fear of being wrong, a fear of being pushed back, outshined, whatever. And that characterizes that avoidant personality. I would say this is way different than a hypersensitive person. A hypersensitive person believes they're right. They believe that they are intelligent far beyond what they really are. We call that the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's a really complex kind of a personality trait. The Dunning-Kruger effect is really the idea of, I think I'm smarter than I really am. And I think that I'm more competent than I really am. And I can actually come across as highly intelligent because I know words and I know numbers and I can look confident. But when I'm finally hired for the job, when I'm finally in the position to have to show what I know, I don't have anything to give from up here because I'm living a full lie. And that lie is that I'm smarter than I truly am. And so the Dunning-Kruger effect is a part of that as well. Okay, guys, let me go back to the chat box, engage you a little bit. Then I'm going to give you the impact that these kind of people can have on your life. If you have a parent who's hypersensitive, how does that impact you? A sibling, how does that impact you? So we're going to get there. Okay, Leslie A, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Leslie A says, some people love to argue and keep drama going. They must be bored with their own life. Yeah, sometimes. I have had neighbors in the past who literally every sound they hear outside, they come out and they're like this, like, where is that coming from? Is that you over there? That neighbor over there never comes out. And I'm just like, oh God, just please go back in your house. So you're right, Leslie A. If somebody is bored, right, this is how they behave. I very much agree with that. Okay, bear with me as I go through this. Force of Living, hello and welcome. Good to see you. And welcome to the channel. Johanne Kobe says, your lives are like a one-on-one session. That is so awesome. Thank you. Somebody else told me that the other day, that I feel like you're my therapist and you're doing, what do they say? Mass therapy. I'm like, no, that's a good point. So thank you for that. That's so nice. Johanne Kobe says, I'm dealing with what you're talking about now. I'm thankful for these group sessions. That's awesome. And I hope you can walk away tonight thinking, wow, I know what to do now, because once you learn the modus operandi, once you know the mode, and the behaviors of a personality or a person, then you can kind of easily figure out what your next steps need to be. You know what I mean? The way that I learned in my 10 years of education, the way that I learned was to experience it up close and personal. Unfortunately, I've had to experience it personally and professionally. The other piece of the puzzle is I did a lot of trainings, a lot of certifications so that I could understand the dynamics, so that when I get into the therapy room, then that is where the real knowledge happens. And that's when the real work begins, not in that classroom, not in that certification course, but in that therapy seat, right? And so it can feel like therapy when you're in a live chat where somebody's like, okay, this is what you need to look at. This is what you need to look at. So it's good that you feel that way. And it's good that we can, one step at a time, really look at personality traits, because it makes identification of them in your life easier. You know, Third Eye Drop says future faking. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, GB Joe. I appreciate you for saying that. Ara, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Ara says, I'm fighting mommy issues. Oh, Oedipus complex, y'all. Feel me? Well, it depends on what that means. You know what I mean? It depends. I don't know what you mean there. Break it down for me, Ara. Ponytail, I know, right? I know, right? I used to literally come home from therapy sessions with my clients, work, engagements, conferences, presentations, trainings. And I would just tell my mom everything, and she would be cracking up for hours. I'm like, Mom, what is so funny about this? I'm traumatized by the various things I've had to deal with in this career. And so she just cracks up. So Ponytail, join the club. Thank you so much, Fairy Girl. You're just so lovely. Thank you. And all of you guys are so sweet to each other. I just love that. Thank you so much for that, Fairy Girl. Devontae Jeffries, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. I hope I said that correctly. And welcome to the channel. Devontae says, psychopath, no emotions, deceitful, no remorse, empathy, prideful, depression, lethargic, apathetic, suicidal thoughts, isolation. Okay. Trying to get where you're going with that. Depression can go under neuroticism. I'm gonna kind of pull this apart a little bit. So depression can go up under neuroticism, right? So the hypersensitive person, but a psychopath isn't hypersensitive, because at the core of who they are, they're cold, they're callous, they don't care what you think. They have Machiavellian personality traits. They're kind of sadistic. So a psychopath is going to be different from a hypersensitive person. A hypersensitive person does have emotions, and they overpower that person and everybody else, Excuse me, guys. Okay, The Good Glow says, it's heartbreaking to hear the couple next door yelling and cursing at the kids on a constant basis. The kids range in age from 6 to 15, and they're just kids living in dysfunction. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Can you imagine what a therapist goes through, The Good Glow? And I'm not talking about just a therapist that has a title, a therapist who really takes their job very, very seriously, as I do and some of my really good colleagues. We take the job so seriously. So when we come in contact with a family that's dysfunctional or toxic in the dynamic, it's really painful. Some of the kids that I get in my current practice now, some of the cases that I'm carrying now, I look at my families and I just think, if there was just one pill, arrow, something that I could just throw into this toxic family dynamic and just cure it, I would love to do it, because this is not healthy. And sadly, sometimes the people in the toxic dynamic do not even know it's a toxic dynamic. So The Good Glow, maybe they're over there yelling and screaming at the kids, but they think that's a normal thing. That's even scarier, because they're going to normalize it. You know what I mean? Yeah, it gets pretty depressing for sure, just to see it and to watch it and to hear it. Okay, bear with me. Sis Peep Game, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat, and welcome to the channel. I don't remember seeing you. Sis Peep Game says, I had someone get offended when I congratulated her on getting her products into Walmart. She thought I was being funny, but I wasn't at all. I think it was because she was comparing herself to me. Most likely, maybe she was. And can you believe this? Now let's twist this for a little bit and look at it from a different angle. Wouldn't it be something if you saying congratulations for getting into Walmart? That's kind of like a big accomplishment, right? But maybe she took it as, congratulations for you getting into Walmart because I didn't think you would ever get there. Or she may take it as, congratulations for getting into Walmart because I didn't really think your products could ever meet that level of expectation. Wouldn't that be something, cis peep game, if she thought that? That would be a hypersensitive personality. You're not going to hear the compliment. You're going to misunderstand. Why? Because you have a fragile ego. And that's where misunderstandings come in, lashing out, grudge holding, the list goes on. Wouldn't that be something if she took it that way? Thank you, Nancy R. I really appreciate you for that. Thank you. And thank you. That is so sweet of you to say. Thank you for prayers. Thank you. I've had an ongoing migraine for days, and the side effect, if you will, of my migraines tends to be really blurry vision. I'm telling you, it's like you once you pass the age of 35, I feel like that's where the grieving begins, because you're like, I can't handle this pain like I used to. I can't handle that stupidity over there like I used to. You just get tired. You grow up, right? Gary Bennett, that's so sweet of you. I'm going to star you and Nancy R's comment. I'm also starring some of the other comments in the chat box. Gary Bennett, thank you so much for saying that. I'm so glad that you feel at home. That's what that says to me. So that's awesome. George Young, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat, and welcome to the channel. George Young says, I always got dirty looks. I could really feel the hate sent my way. Yeah, absolutely. 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 They will give you dirty looks. Hypersensitive people. Oh my God. And don't look better than them. Don't be smarter than them. Don't make more money than them. And really don't live in a better place than they do, because some hypersensitive people tend to be very envious. We call it morbid jealousy, where they will literally race you to the finish line. They will fight you, push you out of the way so they can get to the finish line and say that they're the champion and not you. So there's often morbid jealousy with these kind of personalities as well. Rochelle, thank you so much for that. Yeah. You want to know something briefly, and I'm going to continue to go through these and go back to the content so we can wrap up. Rochelle, I used to use Excedrin for my chronic migraines in college, and I would get what's called rebound headaches. So then my migraine would go away, but because of all the aspirin I was taking to get it to go away, it would come back with a vengeance. And my neurologist back in college put me on every medication under the sun, including what's it called? Anti-epileptic medications. I can't think of what it's called. I almost got it. I can't remember it. But I was on every medication in college under the sun to try to stop these horrible chronic migraines. And thankfully, they found something to at least help me get through college and grad school. But they come back to me every now and then, So thank you for that. I really appreciate you for that. Doberman Mama, I haven't seen you in a while. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Doberman Mama says, can saying too much be explained by simply being too isolated? I unfortunately have gotten into the habit now that working from home has been for 5 years. It's my biggest and bad habit right now. Can saying too much be explained by simply being too isolated? Maybe. Because if you say too much, it could be like a lack of boundaries, right? Like you're not really able to gauge what the boundary is. But it can also be kind of this inability to test the boundaries in a healthy way. You know what I mean? Believing that what you're saying is going to be accepted. Like there's many different ways we can look at that. So there's a big question mark there. My friend Shamita, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. My friend Shamita says, this is such a great topic. I can't stay, but I'm excited to listen to the upload. Thank you so much. I welcome you to come back. Hope you're doing okay as well. AMB, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Bear with me as I go along. Yeah, Ponytail. Were you with me yesterday? Excuse me, guys. Were you with me yesterday where we talked about... I'm forgetting his name again. Paracelsus. Were you with us yesterday where we talked about Paracelsus? Right? I think so, because you're answering somebody's question. Is there hope for a hypersensitive person? And I love that you put up here, there is hope, but only by divine intervention. Paracelsus came up with that. Only by divine intervention. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Regina Myers, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Excuse me. We're going to keep going. Bo, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Okay, whoops, I had the wrong button. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to put your comment up there. I'm just going to put it up there, Bo. Woo. Sorry, guys. I'm hitting all the wrong buttons tonight. Andrew Mercer, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. They can fill you with false hope. Yes, indeed. Miss Janine, I cannot ever go off a live chat without saying hello to you, because you're always so positive. Good to see you tonight. Welcome back to tonight's live chat. Miss Janine MacArthur says, I enjoy your good communication and advice. The ego of bullies in my life can be agitating. They never want to listen to anything but their opinions. Thanks for explaining them. Yes, you're welcome. And thank you for that. That's awesome. Thank you. Okay. One more comment. I'm going to go back to the content. MS says, my mom was queen of saying, act like it. I picked this up when you said it earlier. She'd say, I don't care if you think I hurt you, so act like it didn't happen, meaning it never happened, but it did. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The attitude is, we're going to minimize this right now, right? Okay, one last comment. Ellie Wynn says, oh, heck yeah, hold grudges forever. Yeah, they do. They're kind of stubborn. We're going to go back to the content on that one. They're kind of stubborn, right? They just stay in one place and they don't want to move, you know? So how does this impact you? What happens if you have a mother like this, a father like this, a sibling like this, a boss, you're married to someone like this, you're in a friendship with someone like this, your neighbors are like this? How does this affect you? Well, you might find yourself walking on eggshells, and we call that harm avoidance. Harm avoidance. You don't want to step on the wrong thing, because if you step on the wrong thing, you're going to sink, something's going to explode, or somebody is going to feel stepped on, and that's going to cause a big explosion. So what happens? The typical course is this. You either learn to be quiet and don't bring up things that's going to cause a problem. You either minimize or internalize, your thoughts and feelings, because you don't want to bring it up because it's going to cause an explosion. You kind of find yourself kind of kissing up to the person, if you will, trying to be extra nice and not hurt their feelings because you don't want to trigger something, right? And you may also be guilty in some ways of kind of like, you guys know what a tarp is, right? You're kind of holding it down, hoping that what's under it doesn't explode. And eventually it will explode. It's just, you're kind of doing some pretty good management by harm avoidance. You're saying, I don't want to step on this area that is sensitive for you. So I'm going to pull back. I'm not going to address you about anything. I'm going to minimize everything you just said and did. I'm going to act like nothing ever happened. I'm going to cater to your feelings and your hypersensitivity. I am not going to tell you what I need from you. I'm just going to let you lead the boat because I don't want an explosion. So you may develop harm avoidance over time. You may also notice you have this intensive retrospection. I'll label it that. Very, very intense retrospection. And what that means is this, that you can be a part of a situation with a hypersensitive person, and you later go back in your mind over the various historical offenses that you have supposedly caused to this very hypersensitive person. Your mind kind of processes what happened in history, what happened so many years ago, what happened 2 or 3 nights ago. Your brain goes back to that because any And every opportunity that you have had to talk to this hypersensitive person, they've blown up, they've hung up on you, they've caused an argument, they've held a grudge, they've maintained their anger against you. And so you may find yourself going within and thinking about what they've done in the past. So very, very intense, I'll put it this way, intense retrospection. I'm going to keep it that way. You may also find, you may also find yourself developing a highly sensitive personality over time. You're living under someone who's hypersensitive. You are trying to engage in life with a person who's hypersensitive. What's the best way to kind of protect yourself? It's to walk on the outskirts of that toxic situation and avoid any hot buttons, because again, something's going to explode. So over time, let's say you've grown up with a hypersensitive parent. Over time, you develop an inability to speak up for yourself, fear of conflict. You may become very dependent on other people's thoughts and feelings. You may be highly triggered to anger and you internalize that. You may also avoid conflict. So you become avoidant over time. And so the end result of all of those things can be you become a highly sensitive person, someone who is having a hard time managing their emotions. You may also develop a fear of disagreement. I'm not going to point out that I believe A, B, and C. I'm not going to share my political opinion because I'm afraid somebody's going to target me, challenge me, create a problem with me. So we're not going to talk about religion. We're not going to talk about politics. Sometimes that's wise. Other times it's a fear of disagreement. You may also develop perfectionism over time. If you're dealing with a hypersensitive person, everything has to kind of be so, because if you do something or move something or change something, there's going to be an explosion, right? There's going to be an igniting of intense emotions. So it's better to just make sure everything is neat, everything is organized, everything is perfect. And so over time, you become a perfectionist, There's also I was going to mention, I don't know if I want to mention this. I'm not going to mention what I was thinking of. I'm just going to say there's kind of this process that may happen with you of discounting your own feelings. You're minimizing and discounting your own feelings because you've kind of learned to do that to keep the peace between you and that hypersensitive person. Let me throw in here that all of this is backed by research. All of this can be found in information and research on avoidant personality. And you may also see yourself in here as an avoidant personality. And this can also be an impact, right? The impact on you is the development of an avoidant personality disorder. That is also part of the picture. And I hate to throw this in here before we go back to the chat and wrap up, but sometimes you can develop an oppositional conversational style where it's hard for you to talk to someone. So what do? You oppose everything they say, you twist what they say, not intentionally, it could be unintentionally. You kind of, you set the bar really high for that person to have conversations with you because you're going to challenge them on everything they say. It's almost like this hypersensitive person over time in your life, it creates and molds this person who's on the defense, is afraid to cause issues, right? Just wants to be quiet or isolate, doesn't want to step on the wrong button. We're going to avoid harm at all costs. You may develop an avoidant personality because you don't really want to be in a place of rejection or disagreement, right? So it's almost like their hypersensitivity pushes you into the corner of your own life. And sometimes it's really hard to crawl out of there. Interesting, right? These kind of people, they are something. And you can find them just about anywhere you look. It may be your neighbor, maybe your family, who knows, maybe even your child. The only way to kind of combat hypersensitivity, and you're not going to be able to always identify it with your own eyes, because sometimes it takes years for people to show that they are a highly or hyper, I should say, sensitive personality. But if it comes out, the best way to deal with hypersensitive individuals is to never play into their tactics. Never play into their tactics, because you're going to get stuck and wedged into a position where you either over time learn that if you say anything, it's going to blow up, and that person is going to punish you, right? So you get wedged between that view or that situation, right? Or the other part of this piece could be they're going to come out swinging at you. You know, they're not going to just intimidate you and push you into the corner over there. They may begin to lash out at you. And that could be multiple social media posts against you. It could be spreading rumors in your neighborhood, trying to affect your reputation, you know, calling child protective services on you, going around saying that they are being abused by you, neglected by you, unloved by you. So you kind of get wedged between those two bad places. So the best thing, and maybe we can talk about this, let me know in the chat box if you want me to talk about ways to deal with these people. I've learned over the course of my career how to deal with them, but it is still a challenge at times, you know. But the best way is to never slam your foot on the brakes, right? And do not press that gas pedal too much. So you really have to find that appropriate middle ground and run with it. Okay, let me go back to the chat box, say good night to you guys, answer some questions. So, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Okay, so MZ Gel says, for real though, have you encountered hypersensitive people, codependents, and how do they present? Do their family members blame themselves or feel enmeshed or feel themselves the problem or neurotic? Okay, so let me take the first part of that. Have you encountered hypersensitives, codependents, and how do they present? 100%. All in my 16 years of being a therapist have I encountered hypersensitive people and codependents all the time. Excuse me. You may not know because you may be new to the channel. I don't remember seeing you, but I'm going to throw this out here. Many years ago, when I finally graduated graduate school, I went into this hospital where I was the therapist, the clinician on the floor. I was in a teenage unit in the hospital where kids were very, very serious about their suicidal thoughts. They were very serious about their cuts on their bodies. Some kids would come in with cuts all down their chests, their arms, all down their thighs and legs. And, you know, they needed to be hospitalized and treated, which is why they were there. But when I wasn't with that unit, then I would also work on another unit with adults who had personality pathology, so issues with their personality, and they also had behavioral problems. And hypersensitive and codependent individuals were on that unit. They often present in many of the ways that I've explained in this live chat tonight. I don't want to go back over it, but they do present a certain way, and you will be able to see that sometimes very, very soon in your encounter with them. You know, a hypersensitive person is going to come right out and say what they want to say. They're going to have this I'll fight you down kind of disposition, you know, or they're going to have a disposition of how dare you say that, you know, and they're going to pick and pull apart everything that you say. I've dealt with this in therapy with clients over the past couple of years. Sometimes as a therapist, we have to push the button a little bit to get a reaction, right? And there have been situations where I have pushed that button and I've addressed the situation. And the person, excuse me, the client will say, I'm just surprised you ever brought that up. Like, is that really how you see me? Do you really think I'm a bad person? How could you think I'm a bad person? You've been doing therapy with me for 2 years now. How dare you say that? I can't even believe you said that. I just asked the question. All I want to do. And boom, there you go. Now you realize, whoo, all I said was, maybe we need to explore where your self-esteem may have been hurt by your dad. And that turns into this whole big thing. So they do present a certain way. Now, you're asking me, do their family members blame themselves or feel enmeshed or feel themselves? Absolutely, 100%. It's hard not to, right? You know, even as a clinician, there are times where I still have to go to my mentor. You know, he's been walking with me in my career for so long, since starting college many years ago. And we're really good colleagues now. He's like the long lost dad I've never had, you know? And so I'll go to him and I'll say, you know, I don't know what to think of this. And should I have done this instead of that? And, you know, he'll sit with me and he'll talk with me and he'll be like, yeah, absolutely. Try it this way, try it that way. Because you always walk away sometimes feeling like, what did I do there? It's not you most of the time, it's them. So I hope that answered your awesome question. That was a good question. El Castillo, I hope I said that correctly. Thank you for that. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the channel. Good to have you tonight. Okay, we're going to wrap up here in just a little bit, guys. Okay, bear with me. Jeremy Robinson, hello and welcome. Did I miss you tonight? I'm glad to see you in tonight's live chat. That's an awesome question. You're asking me, so you can't compromise with these kind of people? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, you know? Once you get a hypersensitive person riled up, it's hard to compromise because now they're riding on the wind of their emotions, you know? And so their emotions may go from 0 to 300 and you never have any time to say, wait, that's not what I meant. You didn't hear everything, you know, or wait a minute, we can just make it work this way and not that way. You can't do that with them, right? Sometimes you have to wait until the storm calms, you know, and then you can go in easily and say, okay, let's do it this way. Let's pause. Let's do it this way. See how this works better. And sometimes the person will be like, yeah. And you can say, okay, let's go this way together. And then they're ready to kind of work with you. So you can compromise, but you have to know how to get there. That's a hard one. I like what Dawn One is saying. Hello, Dawn One. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Glad to see you back tonight. Dawn One says, life is like a garden. You have to maintain it and pull the weeds. That is such a good one. Can I steal that? Am I allowed to steal that? Is that copyright? I'm going to steal that, Dawn One. I am. And I'm going to act like I came up with it. When I see my clients this week, I'm going to say life is like a garden. You have to maintain it and pull out the weeds. You know? Dawn One, I'm just joking with you. That is so well said. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use it. And I'll give you credit, I promise. Shervin, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Welcome to the channel. Glad to see you tonight. Shervin says, is there a word or a term to describe a mother that refuses to leave an abuser, even to go as far as invalidating her own kids to keep the peace and avoid seeing the person for who they really are? I'm sorry if you're going through that. Yes, you can call that a traumatic bond. You can call that a dependent personality. And you may even be able to call it codependence as well. So you may want to look those things up. Traumatic bonding, codependency, which you probably already know what that is, and dependent personality disorder. You might find her somewhere in there. Juby Joe said, I hope that was helpful. Juby Joe says, they love when you do get them somewhere, but when things look bleak, it's your fault. I'm a strong person. I can't lie. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Kev Dower says, deflection brings out the ad hominem attacks. Ooh, I need to look that up. I'm going to look that up as soon as we get off. Thank you for that, Kev Dower. Dr. Right Life, Truth Teller, hello and welcome. Good to see you, says the hypersensitive person is hiding behind a mask or scar tissue to cover an unsealed hurt. They are hypersensitive to what happens to them, but insensitive to what they do to others. Yeah, I'm going to star that comment. That is so well said. I very much agree with that. Most hypersensitive people are like that. Good point. Well said. Baby Buttercups. I love that screen name. Hello and welcome. Good to see you. Glad to see you back in tonight's chat. All right, guys, I'm just trying to get to the bottom here. Make sure I get all of you. CBs, I haven't read much of your comments tonight, so let me do that. CB says, my mom lost her fake fingernail in a water cup. Oh my God, is this going to be a story that I can laugh at? It sounds like that's where we're getting, that's, kind of where we're going here. Let me skim this before I read it aloud. Okay. CB says, my mom lost her fake fingernail in a water cup. My son almost drank it. My mother started screaming at me that it wasn't true. Her nail didn't fall off. I didn't even say anything. My husband did. Oh, geez. Well, here's the thing, CBs. If she has those really long nails that my mother can't stand, oh my God, my mom's so against them. It's a possibility. You know what I mean? Even the short nails can be an issue if they pop off or the glue isn't, held on enough, or it's, getting to a certain aging period and it's time to get rid of those nails. They can surely fall off, My late grandmother, who we love so dearly, she used to wear really long nails. I'm talking about those really long nails that go out to here. And my mother just, it was like nails on a chalkboard for my mother to just sit and look at her fingers and her, and she would be like, you're not fixing any food, because they can come off, right? So, you know, maybe your mom's a little hypersensitive. You know what I mean? I hate to say it, but I think that's what you're trying to say. Q Code Award 1, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. We're going to sign off here in literally 5 seconds. Jessica J, thank you so much for that. Blessings to you and to all of you on the channel. Always, you guys are so beautiful and wonderful and supportive and welcoming. And when new people come in, let me just tell you this, because you don't see behind the scenes like I do. When new people email me, come on my channel and comment. Sometimes they will DM me on Instagram, my slowly developing Instagram. Sometimes they will find me on there and they'll say, thank you so much for the community that you've created. And then some other people will say, thank you so much for the community that is on your channel that you and your community members have created. And my heart just gets so happy because new people come into this and they're like, this is amazing. You know, some groups can be really toxic. This is not one of them. So I want you guys to know that the community on the channel is a healthy one. It's a vibrant one. And it's just wonderful. So thank you for making it that way, because you guys could really make my job hard. You know what I mean? If you wanted to. So you should know that. I'm always getting comments about how wonderful you guys are. Okay. Let me just skim one more time, make sure that I'm not missing anyone. Nancy R says, I've completely enjoyed and needed our conversation this weekend. Your lives are the bomb. Thank you so much, Nancy R. So glad, so glad. We're going to end on you, okay? Guys, I love you so much. Thank you for all your support, your memberships, your sharing of videos and live chats. It's wonderful. I hope this was insightful tonight. We're going to come back next week with a video and 2 live chats about some more interesting things that I think that you're going to really appreciate. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.